So now, am I correct? We can open the floor for questions?
Yeah, absolutely.
And does anybody have a question? I know that was information overload, I know. I'll just start at this side. Yes, sir.
We run double deep hives, and then we're scooping it from there up and harvest them out. Do you overwinter with double deeps?
Okay, his question, he's asking about double deeps. I'm wondering if we overwinter with double deeps. My preferred colony is a double deep, but not necessarily for the same reasons as some other beekeepers. In our videos, you'll see us running a lot of singles and a lot of double deeps both. The reason I prefer double deep is because they're more forgiving. You can go farther into spring before they start preparing to swarm, and you can go farther into spring before they starve to death. A single is tough. Obviously a single and a medium or a single and a shallow is kind of that happy compromise between the two, but you still are going to have more swarming unless you do some pretty good splitting, try to keep that colony under control. And because we're so much into producing nukes and things that we sell, I like having both brood boxes the same type of frame, so everything is interchangeable. For a long time I was selling nukes. When I used to go to California a lot, I sent a lot of colonies out there as a deep and a shallow because I could go 4 pallets high on a semi-truck. Double deeps you can only go 3 pallets high. And I would make nukes every year. Well, it wasn't very long before the frames in all my deeps were really good because I was always cycling frames into this nuke production. My shallows just turned into terrible old comb because I wasn't cycling them. So that's one drawback to not having both boxes be the same thing that you can produce nukes with. And I just really like double deeps. Some people say you can produce more honey with singles, and it's true, you can, but the problem is they need more attention. You're going to swarm easier and you're going to starve a lot easier. And one of the pros to singles is that it's a lot easier to find the queen. Your mite treatments are going to be more effective because the brood nest is more confined. So there's pros and cons to both. I personally prefer double deeps. Yes, sir.
I noticed you didn't discuss hard sugar for cakes, for food.
I'll be real honest. His question is about using hard sugar for feeding bees. I'll be real honest. I don't have much experience with it. All I know is what I hear from others and what I read in the bee magazines. I'm sure I can't believe that it can be as good for the bees as feeding sucrose syrup. But I say that also, admitting that I have never done hardly any hard sugar feeding, so I probably shouldn't say much about it.
Can you use the oxalic acid any time of the year, or do you specifically?
Yes, his question is, can you use oxalic acid any time of the year? And the answer is yes, but you have to understand its mode of action. When there's brood in the colony, it's not as effective. In fact, they're even going so far now as to say it's okay to use oxalic acid vaporization with your honey supers on. They're finding that it doesn't get in the honey, and that they haven't figured out how much it takes yet before it starts getting into your honey. And Lewis is talking about that in an upcoming video also. He's talking about that very question. So oxalic acid is organic. It's relatively non-toxic. There's a lot of oxalic acid in some of our foods. It's what makes our rhubarb and spinach and some of those foods kind of that gives it that little bitter taste. Oxalic acid is already in honey. It's already there.
But if you did it every 3 days, like 3 different times, wouldn't you get all the mites out of there?
Well, okay, his question is, if you do oxalic vaporization every 3 days, will you get all the mites out of there? If you do it long enough, you will. You have to consider that the mites are starting to enter cells. According to Lewis Bartlett, they start to enter the cells within 3.5 to 4 days. So the old instructions of doing it every 7 days plus the lesser dose of 1 gram really wasn't very effective. People thought they were doing a great thing by following the directions, just to find out that they didn't have bees in the spring and they didn't understand why. So the answer is yes, but you have to go through the whole brood cycle. You're looking at that time period between 9 days when the cell gets sealed and when it's hatched. You've got to cover that whole time span with treatments in order to catch most of your mites. And even then you won't get, I'm not sure there's such a thing as getting 100% of them. That'd be a tough thing to do, but the answer is yes, it does work. You just got to understand it and use it properly. Yes, sir.
So I'm a new keeper, and you said earlier.
Speak up just a little.
I'm a new keeper, so you said earlier feed when you need to.
Yeah.
Could you explain that a little bit better?
New beekeepers asking about feeding when you need to. Well, you know, you don't have to feed. You don't just absolutely have to feed. I use it as a tool to create a situation in my colonies, but if they're full of honey and full of bees, you don't have to. We're constantly splitting bees and using sucrose syrup to build them up on and get them heavy for winter. Right now, if you have a double deep colony and it weighs 150 pounds, you know, you really don't have to feed. But having said that, I would recommend feeding anyway in September when the pollen's coming in to heighten this stimulating effect, you know, where they're raising winter bees before winter. I think feeding in September. Now, up north, goldenrod creates a nectar flow. In this neighborhood, it does not. We get a really good pollen flow off of goldenrod, but the nectar coming in is kind of minor. So if you really want the whole shebang, you know, about getting the chemistry in the colony right before they're raising winter bees and going into winter, I recommend feeding thin sucrose syrup in September, even if you're heavy. If you got a lot of weight and you don't want to put much in, just 1 or 2 holes in your jar or bucket, just a little trickle flow. It doesn't take a lot to stimulate. Yes, sir.
Sean Jones. I read a lot going into a Heroes to Hives program.
Oh, yeah.
And one of the things that was around the turn of the 20th century, there was an article, several articles that came out how they were preventing swarms. And one of the things they did was actually did a split, but then they would kill the queen and then bring them back together. So they'd have a lot of bees when it was time for the flow. Have you ever done that? And would you encourage it if you weren't doing if you weren't trying to build your apiary?
So his question, in case you didn't hear it, is about killing the queen, letting them raise their own?
Well, when you do a split, if you didn't introduce a queen, they're going to start building a queen.
Letting the split raise a queen and then bring it back together with the old queen to create a larger colony?
Right.
It absolutely works, yeah. And we do that with something called a double screen board in a little different way. When we run across a colony that is...
Bottom top.
That's right. We're splitting the colony and letting both halves rear a queen, hopefully. A lot of people don't realize that when you have a colony that swarms, or you let them, they call it a walk-away split, when you just leave them with eggs and let them raise their own, you really only have an average success rate of about 75, maybe 80%, depends on your neighborhood and weather conditions and nutrition and all of that stuff. So a lot of times we like to create a condition in both halves that are raising a queen, whether it was a swarm and we left a cell in both halves, or we kill the queen and give both halves a cell that we produced. And you know, it not only gives you a better chance of having a queen that was successful in one of those halves, but if they're both successful and you don't want to expand and you put those two halves back together, suddenly you can have a colony and a half. And if you can time it right when the honey flow is beginning, you can make a lot more honey. And we do it quite often just because we run into a colony that's swarmed, put cells in both halves, let them raise queens in both halves, and if they both make it, put it back together, and we let the beehive figure out which queen's going to stay. It works great. I don't know if that answered your question, but it gives you a little idea.
Yeah. I don't know about most of the folks here, but I want a cap, of how many hives I want.
You mean you don't want 1,000 colonies or anything like that? No.
So, but I really do like the idea of a bunch of honey from a smaller apiary.
No, it absolutely works. Using a split to create a new queen and use that split to introduce back to the original colony and requeen. It's actually a wonderful concept. It works tremendous. And if you do it properly, you can end up with a much larger colony than you would have otherwise. Yeah.
When you do that, do you double stack?
If you do that, you better have more supers because you're likely to make more honey. So
what they had done is they would put one of them on the bottom, and one of them, and you put separate
Yeah.
supers in between.
I do that. I've done that with the scenario I described where we had a colony that swarmed and we split it. At some point, you've got a decision to make. You know, your honey flow here ends in what, mid-May or something like that. At some point, both queens producing this massive amount of brood is going to become a liability and not an asset. You need to figure out on the calendar where you want to end that massive brood production, because those are just going to be a bunch of hungry mouths that are going to eat up your honey crop later. Around here, maybe mid-April to the 1st of May, shut that situation down, bring them together so the brood rearing just remains with one queen and kind of bring it back into normal. Does that make sense? Yeah. Yes, sir.
I got several hives that are about 4 or 5 supers high, and I pulled my honey supers off, and now I got too many bees that won't fit in the box.
It won't take long. He's commenting about having pulled his supers, and he's got a lot of bees crammed in the box. Your colony is in decline in a hurry right now. You look at that colony 3 weeks from now and get back with me. I think you're going to find that all that bearding and massive quantities of bees on the outside will have disappeared to some extent. It's not a big deal. It's not a problem. They're declining rapidly right now. The brood rearing right now is maybe 30% of what it was just a month or two ago. So as soon as a lot of those older bees die off, which is in a few weeks, you're going to see a huge difference. I wouldn't worry about it.
Would it be okay to shake some of those bees in some of the weaker hives?
Absolutely, yeah. Some people will take those bees while they're still young enough to do some good and make packages with them. And you can always boost other colonies with packages, or bee bodies, so to speak. A lot of beekeepers, something very funny happens in some of the northern states. A lot of beekeepers blow bees out to harvest their honey in the very northern states and then restart in the spring. And other people will come and buy those bees that they blew out and start packages late in the season, take them way south and start new colonies, or boost weak colonies that they already have. So this idea of using bees to boost, just bee bodies without brood to boost other colonies is legit. And if you're going to do it now before those bees start to disappear and get too old on you. Yeah, now's the time to do that. Absolutely. Yes, sir.
So with 2,000 hives, how often do you go in and check a hive during the highest heat point of the summer?
Maybe every 3 or 4 weeks. His question is, with a large quantity of colonies, how often do we go in and check? We obviously can't check them once a week. We just try to manipulate them in such a way that we think, it's kind of a quantity over quality situation. Obviously our colonies won't perform as well as those that belong to somebody that can check them every week, but we try to do manipulation so we feel comfortable leaving them for 3 weeks or 4 weeks. Once the supers go on, we do very little. Sometimes we can see, we pop the lid and we don't see very many bee bodies, and we know that colony has swarmed on us, and then we'll dive in, split it, put the double screen board in the middle so that there's cells in both halves, and increase the odds of us having a laying queen in that position later on. That's about all we do. But if it's full of bees, we don't go down to the brood nest and check. Once the honey flow starts, odds are they'll just stay put and make honey for you as long as they got a lot of space. We just kind of play the quantity game instead of the quality game. Yes, sir.
So you can introduce any bees into other hives and...
Sounds crazy. You can introduce bees into other colonies, what he's talking about, just by shaking them into a package and moving the package of bees to another apiary and just dumping them in. If you're really worried about them getting together, you can mist a little sugar water in the colony before you dump the new bees in. And sucrose, by the way, I know most of you aren't going to use fructose, so I don't need to say that, but fructose sprayed on bees is hard on. Sucrose isn't so bad. Or even just water, just mist them with water. And sometimes you don't have to do anything at all, but if there's a honey flow, you don't have to do much. But if it's a dearth like what you're in right now, and robbing is a problem, and the bees can be vicious, and you might want to do a little bit of something, mist some sugar, light sugar syrup, either on the bees you're adding or on the bees you're adding to. and I say something kind of colorful, I say by the time they're all done licking each other off, they're sisters. Yes, ma'am.
Do you ever have a problem of dysentery?
The question is, do I have a problem with dysentery? And the answer is no, we don't ever see it. It's more of a problem in the northern states where the bees can't get out and fly and defecate as often in the winter or in spring or iffy spring weather. Down here in the south, the bees are able to get out and we take it, the polite term is cleansing flights. And as long as they're able to do that often enough, dysentery isn't. If you see dysentery in Danielsville, Georgia, you've got something else going on. You've got a problem. It should be rare in this area. Where you might see it is in colonies that are fighting a high moisture problem, and they're always too wet. Bad food can do it. We'll back way up onto sugar syrup. I wasn't going to get into this, but it's very interesting. I know of several fellas in the far north that try to take as much honey as possible away from their bees and feed them back sucrose syrup because they have less dysentery. The reason is that many fall honeys have a high mineral content, and not to mention that they can crystallize also, which makes it poor winter feed. But if you have honey that has a high mineral content and the bees aren't able to get out and take cleansing flights, they can get dysentery, whereas if you would have taken that away and fed them back pure sucrose syrup that has very little mineral content, they have very little dysentery. Yes, sir?
What happened to sourwood this year?
I don't know. Could you tell me what happened to the sourwood this year? The no-show, zero? I don't know.
I got 6 supers, that was it. It's just like you cut it off.
Well, I'm also going to step out on a limb and say, are you positive it's sourwood? Because in many cases, people made honey during the sourwood flow, but it was something else. We made honey during the sourwood flow, but I've not tasted the first drop of sourwood.
It's like water and it tastes like sourwood.
Okay, well maybe you got a little sourwood. You would be the exception.
The rain was relentless for the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, I've made sourwood in rainy years before, and we had some nice days this year when the trees were in full bloom. Sourwood's that way. It's just a persnickety, that's an old-fashioned word, persnickety flow. It's sometimes there's no understanding what triggers it on or what triggers it off. And I like to, at first I'm disappointed, but then I remind myself that if it was easy, everybody in the United States would be over here trying to make sourwood honey. So maybe it's not so bad after all. We have a bad year now and then. It makes it more valuable too. We'll run out of last year's sourwood here shortly, and then it will be out for so long when it comes back anew, people will be really hungry for it. Yeah, sourwood's great honey. Not everybody thinks it's the best, but I'd say half the people that taste sourwood honey think it's one of the better honeys they've ever tasted. It's got a taste all of its own, it really does. It's so unique, and you can only get it in quantity in the southern Appalachian area, so it makes it even more valuable. It's really what put me into business. When I first got started in Georgia, it was sourwood that gave me the income to expand. After 3 or 4 years, suddenly I had a bad year like this. It wasn't even as bad as this year, but it was bad enough to where the income wasn't there, and that forced me into other ways of making money. So, any other questions before? Yes, sir?
How do you suggest wintering your honeycomb?
Well, my suggestion isn't realistic for most people. We rent cooler space at the local food bank, and all of our supers go into the cooler for the winter. If you don't have any signs of brood having been reared in your honey supers, you really don't need to do much at all. But if your supers have either pollen plugs or old cocoon from having reared brood in those supers, you've either got to keep them cold or you've got to get something on them like paramoth or something like that. And it can hit you quicker than you think. You can look at them one day and say, well, they're looking pretty good. I'll visit this problem 2 or 3 weeks from now, and suddenly you go, oh my. It's an ugly sight when you get a bunch of honey supers that are trashed from wax moth, and it's so costly because comb is like gold. It's so valuable. So cool is the best way. It's totally non-toxic, no chemicals involved. It only takes, all you got to do is get it down to about 45 degrees and they won't bother it. I don't know if you have a way you can do that, but that's your best bet, yeah.
How long do you need to freeze the frames?
I don't know for sure, but I think it's only like 24 to 48 hours in the freezer, and it kills the wax moth. In one of my videos, I show a fella in Tennessee that freezes his supers for 24 hours and then puts them in, he actually stacks them outside, but they're bee bug tight and nothing can get in them, and he finds that that works. They're out there in the heat right now, but he froze them, you know, a month ago and then stacked them up in such a way that nothing can get in, and he says it's no problem. I guess I'm about to get the hook right here, so.
Well, we're running over a little bit.
Okay.
If you have any more questions for Bob, I'm sure he'll
Yeah, I'm hanging out, so I'll be glad to talk to anybody.
Yeah, we do have to, but I do want to give another round to Bob. Thank you very much.